Earthlings, and welcome to Still Alive. We're Ronnie's in Britain and I'm in Ireland. We're both suffering a bit of a heat wave, I suppose we might call it, Ronnie.
Yeah, I thought I was going to melt earlier. I had to go shopping this morning. It was like the heat was, almost unbearable. So
shopping in the heat. That's
shopping
no good,
in the
it?
heat. It's a nightmare. I think it's about 26 at the moment here where I am.
The thing is, though, people will be tuning in thinking, "Oh, that's a bit chilly."
They probably will from some parts of the world. Yeah, no, but it's hot. It's a bit too hot for me. I don't like the real big heat very much.
Well, if it was cold, you wouldn't like that either, would you?
No, if it's too cold, no. I prefer the sort of moderate temperatures, really.
Okie dokie. Right. So people, if you're logged in anywhere else besides my YouTube and you want to take part in the chat, the best thing to do is transfer to my YouTube. So, Ronnie, did you do you remember when I told you my chiropractor joke?
I don't think I. No, I vaguely remember it, but I don't know. I don't totally remember it.
Hang on, it was it was a week back.
Are you here all week, Roger?
Yeah, I'll be back.
Are you here all week back?
There's Graham in the comments. He got advance notice that I was going to do that, so that's what. So he goes, do it, Roger. So I had to do it. Now, another one we've been asked to, or I've been asked to, just have a little word about why we put this up. It's really to do with the fact that I'm very critical of this idea of super chats and whatever else there is, which is similar to that kind of idea. But I'm not opposed to people giving content creators donations and stuff. It's just that the idea of making them do it in order to ensure that your post, your comment gets on the screen. I that's the bit of it that I don't like, really. Yeah. And also it can be abused in the sense that there was a time when somebody spent about $130 in order to be the person being featured on screen all the way through this live. So it can be abused in that sense. And so, I mean, I've got no problem with people, with content creators wanting to, for example, send them a one-off on Patreon over and above what they normally do. But the idea of paying to actually, get your stuff on the screen just seems a bit off to me, Ronnie. So that's the reason for it, really.
It's kind of discriminatory against people that aren't so well off, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And that's what happened on this live stream. There was somebody who was well off and had a particular kind of political axe to grind, and they made sure that they were able to, have their say over and above, over above everybody else. And so I just thought, that's not on, really. That's not on. Anyway, let's say hello to people in the chat. So Lorraine was first. So hi, Lorraine. Michael, not first for once. So, but he did come up with this little witticism, which is probably better than my joke, probably.
Yeah, every week's a miracle, isn't it, for us?
Yeah. And then I said that you're all steamed up. So you're all steamed up. So this is one of the Facebook pages that we stream to as well as this. You probably can't see this, Ronnie, but I can see that we've got one person tuned in on Facebook. Deb is here. Terry, hi Terry. Graham, Darren. Who else? Sophia, hi. to begin to do. I think that might Canadian Vegan Forever. Hello, I'm glad to see that you've recovered from your jet lag. That might be it now. I think that's it so far. Right, Ronnie. So you've got this fangled idea about infighting. No, INREACH.
INREACH, yeah, INREACH. Yeah, I mean, I just hope it doesn't sound rude to some people, or perhaps that's just my mind.
INREACH.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'll have to send me a private memo because I don't know what you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah, of course, we've all heard of outreach. That's where you're kind of trying to educate non-vegans to go vegan. I think that's vegan outreach. But I kind of think it's important that we have INREACH as well. Like kind of education.
I think you ought to explain what it is.
Yeah, I mean, in INREACH is educating people who are already vegan, or who consider themselves to be vegan, because it's my view that vegan education doesn't stop when somebody becomes vegan, and I think it kind of continues. That there's a lot of people who regard themselves as vegan, who don't totally grasp the true nature of veganism, and don't totally grasp or don't totally understand all the areas in which other animals are oppressed and exploited. And so I think that vegan education doesn't actually stop when somebody becomes vegan. I think it's a continuing process. And all of us are learning all the time. I'm finding out, all the time about, various ways that other animals are oppressed. And, and once you find out about that, then, you sort of do your best to try and do something about that, or at least to avoid any involvement in it.
Yeah, you're gonna hit a bit of pushback straight off, aren't you? Because who decides, who needs educating and in what sense?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a question of going up to someone saying, "Hey, you need educating more." I think it's just as we do on the show, really, because really a lot of our show that we do, like tonight, is to do with INREACH. We're talking mainly to people who are already vegan, who consider themselves to be vegan. And our message is aimed at those people. I think we have a probably exclusively vegan audience. And so what we're doing with this show is INREACH. We're talking to people about, about what does it really mean to be vegan, or what should it mean to be vegan. And we've done shows about the forms of the oppression of other animals that a lot of vegans tend to ignore or not.
Well, that's another reason why we shouldn't be charging them to be able to comment either as well, because it's got to be democratic, hasn't it?
Well, absolutely, yes. We want everyone to be able to ask questions and to and to comment. I mean, we may not be able to kind of get to all the comments, of course, but it means there's no discrimination in favor of people that have got more money than others.
Yeah. Okay. So the real problem, we were kind of touching on this before we came on air, which was the fact that and it's difficult not to kind of come over as a bit of a boring old fart saying this. It's just that it seems like the communication skills are not what they once were. Let's put it this way. And so we've always got that thing about the way that people, especially on social media, interact and talk to each other is not what you would do if you were over on a table, and it over a table having a chat, as it were, and it's not also what used to be the case when you used to have to write a letter. Before the internet, it was a question that you'd see some comment or see some article And it's the same with responding to the press. You kind of go, oh, in response to, and then you kind of reference what you're talking to, right, and all that. And so you have to construct an argument, which is usually based on explaining a little bit about what the argument is that you want then to critique. And so, in other words, it's a lot more considered than just a few one-liners, which is usually sprinkled with swear words. So, in other words, Ronnie, what I'm saying is INREACH, which I would call, from a social movement point of view, movement reflexivity, the idea of being reflective about what's going on in the movement. I mean, is it kind of doomed because of the modern way that we talk to each other now, do you think?
Well, I think it makes it more difficult because what tends to happen is on social media is that an argument ensues rather than a discussion, because you get people, you get insults flying about. You get a lot of people that don't really, they seem not to really read or understand what the, if a post is put up on, say on Facebook, it could be Twitter or, or elsewhere, putting forward an idea, then what tends to happen is it's almost as if, there are quite a few people that don't really read it properly, and will actually attack the person who's put up the post for something that the person hasn't actually really said, if you see what I mean. It's
well, I think the obvious version of that is when somebody might actually respond with, say, a 10-minute video and say, watch this, that'll give you the clue, kind of thing. And then within 3 minutes, somebody's saying, well, that's a load of, whatever, do. And you know for a fact they haven't had time to even watch it. No. It's a little bit like you don't have time. You haven't had time to read that. Never mind, consider it.
Yeah, I mean, I've had that. I mean, in video discussions, there's been someone commenting, you don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. And I've said, well, did you watch the video? Oh, I watched the first few minutes and then I stopped watching it. I thought, well, you haven't, how can you say that? Because you've not watched it. You've not watched it all the way through. So that is true. And that is something I've experienced.
I've lost count of the number of times that I've been called an ivory tower academic online by people who don't quite know who I am, so it's all a bit weird. But
well, that's right. Yeah. And of course, I think this is kind of another problem with the movement that people aren't aware of the history. They don't know the history, and so we kind of, in a sense, need to know the history, and because otherwise we can't learn from it.
Well, some people would say you don't need to, and also that was then, this is now, and that's just a load of boring old farts. And this is up to date stuff. We're not talking about your black and white days. So maybe we haven't made the case for people to know the history.
Well, I think they just don't. Well, I don't know how we can make the case any more than we do already, just by saying, well, look, if you can't, to understand, for instance, in terms of what veganism is all about, what does it mean to be vegan? What's the definition of veganism? The only way you can determine that is by going back to the founders of the vegan movement, the founders of the Vegan Society, for instance, and determining what they intended. That's really the only way you could do it, because it's
more complicated though, Ronnie, isn't it? Because we've now got an official definition, which itself doesn't really, articulate what the founders said. So that's a kind of real complication. So if you go back, you can go, are we talking about going back to the 1940s, or are we talking about going back to 7988? Because that's the option.
I'd say you've got to go back to the people that coined the word vegan and the people that founded the Vegan Society. It's really what their intentions are, and really the Vegan Society today and the definition of the Vegan Society should be reflecting what those original founders' intentions were. All right, maybe not using the same language, because language has changed from those days. But the definition of veganism today should reflect what those people intended.
Yeah, look, I was called a gatekeeper for providing links to some of our pioneers. But I mean, you must have had. I mean, I've had it, and I'm guarantee you've had this, Ronnie, which is people go, I don't care what Donald Watson said, and I don't care what the pioneers said. It's irrelevant to me.
Well, if you're going to call yourself vegan, you say someone called themselves a Marxist and they said, I don't care what Karl Marx said. I'm just going to make up what Marxism is. Well, that'd be ridiculous, wouldn't it? And it's the same, really, isn't it? It's the same principle.
Yeah, I'd say so. Just wanted to go back to a couple of comments that I saw before. Yeah, so Jennifer said INREACH sounds cool, and it should be really. It should be kind of what it should be, like an ongoing, friendly kind of cooperative kind of process, really, shouldn't it?
Oh yes, absolutely, yes, because because you're dealing with people who've got good intentions. You see, if someone becomes vegan, because I mean, first of all, I think it's important for people to understand that veganism is a justice movement. It's not an environmental movement. It's not a health movement. Although veganism is better for the environment, and it can be better for health. But veganism itself is a justice movement, and it's a movement against oppression and against exploitation.
Don't you think the problem there is when you get people saying that veganism has got nothing to do with those things, which for me is wrong, particularly the environmental thing.
Well, you see, I would say there's two ways in which kind of veganism is connected with environmentalism. I think, first of all, veganism is definitely of benefit to the environment. I mean, especially if you look at the huge contribution to the climate crisis created by animal agriculture. Obviously, if everyone in the world were to adopt a vegan diet, that would kind of that would pretty much solve the climate crisis. Because it's like, I mean, for instance, the environmental organization Climate Healers, that they've done a paper that comes to the conclusion that animal farming is 87% responsible for global heating. You see, so in that sense, yeah, everyone adopting a vegan diet is would be massively better for the environment, and also in terms of preventing the extinction of species, because we could rewild so much land if everyone adopted a vegan diet, because we wouldn't need nearly as much land to produce our food, for instance. And then there's also the idea that adhering to vegan principles and not wanting to cause oppression to other animals would mean that the other major aspects of the other major driver of global heating, which is the burning of fossil fuels, we deal with that as well. Because we wouldn't.
It's just really. I mean, it's not. I mean, this is not even hard, so I don't really. I don't see why it's a problem. But if somebody wants to talk to you about the environment, you can talk to them about that. I mean, if somebody wants to talk to me about animal cruelty, I will do that. But then I will bring it back round to what veganism is about.
You see, I've just talked about how somebody being vegan can also have the effects of protecting the environment, you see. But I would say that protecting the environment is and should be an integral part of being vegan, because of the huge suffering and death caused to other animals by adverse human impact on the environment. And for me, that should be included in the vegan ethic. Other things included within the vegan ethic. I mean, the main thing that everyone includes is like, don't consume animal products. And there are some people that think that that's all that veganism means. It's just a diet. And so those people that think that kind of, need to be educated, and I'd say, yeah, gently educated, that veganism is actually far more than that, and it's in opposition to all exploitation of sentient life.
You like this one, Ronnie? This is Vegan Paul. I got told in the Friends of Camp Beagle group today that being vegan won't help beagles.
Well, it absolutely will help. And I mean, it was interesting that I was at an anti-vivisection event on Saturday in Hull, and it was in protest against a company called Banting in Kingman, who breed and supply animals to laboratories, and
they've been around for years, haven't they?
Decades. Yeah, they've been around years. Yeah. I think we raided some of their places.
Yeah.
in my ALF days, and I think we rescued animals from them. And they've got a place up on in East Yorkshire, and it was a march in Hull, and with speakers, and I was one of the speakers. And in my speech, or certainly in part of my speech, I pointed out that a really important way, a fundamental way of opposing vivisection, opposing animal experimentation, is to promote veganism. Because why do we, if you ask the question, what's the fundamental reason that experiments on other animals take place? And the fundamental reason that those experiments take place is because of speciesism and human supremacism. So if we want to end all animal experiments, we have to challenge that attitude. We have to challenge speciesism. We have to challenge human supremacism, because that's the underlying reason why. Well, that's the underlying reason why all exploitation and oppression of other animals takes place, including animal experiments. So educating other people to become vegan is a really important way of opposing and eventually getting rid of animal experiments. It's absolutely fundamental. It's absolutely crucial. It's so important for someone to say that that veganism has nothing to do with animal experiments. It's that they're like that's a complete misunderstanding of
I think they would probably say it's a little, but the point is, Ronnie, already we're seeing that if we're talking about INREACH, which sounds a great idea, and the idea of vegans talking to each other is obviously, well, yeah, this is what should happen and why not and all that. But if you've got the single issue people, if you've got the animals only people, if you've then got the veganism got nothing to do with the environment kind of people, then already you can kind of see how difficult this task would be, because you're going to get some fundamental disagreements.
Yes, but you see, I would kind of take everyone back to basics, and I'd ask someone, because interesting enough, a lot of those people that will be saying, veganism's got nothing to do with, campaigning against animal experiments, a lot of those people will be vegan themselves. This is the irony, because they are traditional single issue campaigners like we were back in the day. They're like a remnant of the old days, really, that's carried on, because that's what we were like. That's what we were like.
It's because veganism gets in the way of that way of doing it, which is kind of, see, I'm a little bit confused about this, because even in vegan outreach, we're quite welcoming to people who are not yet vegan, right? So it's not as though vegan outreach is there and somebody comes along and takes an interest in you, saying, well, if you're not vegan, go away, right? And so, but it seems like the fundamental problem for the single issue people based on vivisection, for example, or anything else for whatever, is the fact that they want or expect a lot of non-vegans to be central to their campaign, right? And so the focus on veganism is going to stop them getting involved. I think that's what they're worried about, isn't it?
I think it's kind of partly to do with that, but I think it's partly to do with, you know, they kind of want the concentration to be on the particular single issue that they're concerned with. So they would feel that if someone's...
So they think veganism is a dilution then?
They think veganism is educating people to become vegan. They think is like a distraction from that.
Distraction, okay.
In other words, if I'm out educating people to become vegan, instead of protesting outside my nearest animal research laboratory, then I'm not doing, I'm not doing what is required to put an end to animal experiments. You see that in their opinion. Whereas I would argue I'm absolutely doing the most important thing I can do to put an end to animal experiments.
My experience of this, Ronnie, is that you've got some people in the movement, and there are also a lot of them are actual vegans on themselves, but they're very pessimistic about the idea of veganism, and so they think that is trying to bring something very distant into focus, whereas here we've got an issue right there in front of us, so let's do that. Right.
Yeah, I call it, it's like immediate. Well, it's what I call immediatism, and I think it's something that plagues humanity, actually.
It's understandable, though, isn't it?
Well, I think it's something that's maybe a little bit in our DNA. You see, because if you go back to days when when humans lived in caves, then their most pressing concern was like immediate threats. Immediate threats to their survival. Say, like if I was going to say if a dinosaur came in the cave, but that'd be like not sort of that wouldn't be historically correct, would it? But maybe a saber-toothed tiger. They'd be like worried about stuff like that. Immediate. All the time. It's about like kind of surviving from one minute to the next minute, and so all the time, what you're concerned about is immediate threats. There's no long term. There's nothing long term in anything in that situation. That those people would not think of any long term threats. It would be all about immediate threats. You see, and I think that's something that's kind of stayed with us. Although we've kind of technologically, things have changed. Massively. Our technology has become so much more advanced since those days. But I think that maybe our brains in some ways haven't, or that part of our brain that
but Ronnie, if you're saying we're hardwired to do that, then you're actually going against.
I don't think that we're hard. I don't think we're hardwired to do that in the sense that there isn't an alternative. But I think that's something that will pull people in that particular direction. I think within humans there's different forces that kind of can pull us different ways. And like, for instance, if you're trying to educate somebody to go vegan, then their concern about what is happening to the other animals and is something that would like pull them in the direction of veganism, but then they've got other pulls pulling them the other way, such as like not wanting to be different to anyone else. Force of habit. They're used to eating particular foods, and people don't like change, and so there's these conflicting tensions within people. And I think that is something that was within people. This thing about to only look at what's immediate rather than looking more long term is equivalent to that. So I don't think it's something that can't be overcome, because the people do become vegan, don't they? This kind of force of habit and want to be like everyone else.
It's not impossible, but there's a bit of resistance.
It's a resistance. It's that that I think that's an explanation of why people tend to be like that. But I don't think it means they have to be like that, and I don't think it means they can't be shown that isn't really the best way to be.
Okay, so I got a couple of questions for you. We need to maybe talk about the how of INREACH, and maybe attach to that question the idea about, are we any good at it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the how. I think it's like you kind of I think it's really important to kind of approach people as kind of allies rather than that they're in any way a kind of enemy. I mean, these are people that obviously they become vegan or they regard themselves as vegan, and so my first question would be like, oh, well, why are you vegan? And obviously if they say it's for health, then I think that's then there's another type of conversation.
Well, I wasn't thinking about it in that kind of sense. I wrote down a couple of examples that I've seen. I mean, obviously you get a lot of people who either seem to allude to or actually blatantly suggest that veganism is a diet, but then you'll get other people saying that things like the vegan movement was started by Gary Yourofsky, this kind of stuff. And so if the idea is to INREACH to those people, what kind of language can we use?
I'd say, well, how do you well, if say someone did think it was started by Gary Yourofsky, I'd say, well, are you aware?
Don't laugh. There's quite a few people who say,
yes, yes, I'm sure there are. I don't know there are. I think just to say, well, look, do you know the history of the vegan movement? Do you know when veganism actually started? And just talk to them about that, because if they think veganism was started by Gary Yourofsky, they're obviously not aware of the history. And so you kind of have to explain that to them, and and kind of go down that road.
I've found, and I'm not ruling out the fact that it was just me that didn't do this very well, but I've done that. In fact, I came to those kind of conversations with the expectation that if I said to people, well, welcome to the movement and everything, do you know about the history of it? You'll be amazed about the radicalism and all that. I've actually got completely stonewalled on that, and they kind of almost like, go away, we're not interested. Almost as though you're humiliating them for not knowing the history, which you're not doing. No. So you're just pointing out that there's a history that they don't know about. I mean, most of them are too young to know about it. But one major response, to me at least, is that a lot of people are just totally not interested because they can't see the relevance of it.
Well, I think that kind of discussion can be had about that. If they say, well, I don't understand that, why that's relevant, then a discussion can be had about that. Why don't they consider it relevant?
Well, I think it sometimes it's because it contradicts the construction of the situation as they've come to understand it. For example, I had a conversation with someone who was talking about Donald Watson's 1944 definition of veganism, which doesn't exist. They were actually talking about the 1979 to 88 one, but they were attributing to Donald Watson, which is very common. And also, when it got on to things that Reagan had said, I was just told that I was talking BS when I was quoting Reagan, because it didn't fit their worldview.
No. And, there may be some people that are so entrenched in their positions that it can't, that kind of whatever you said. But you see, there's also another way of doing it. It's like, if you say to someone like, well, why are you, if you're talking about people that are vegan because they care about what's happening to other animals, what humans are doing to other animals, if that's the, and I think the majority of vegans fall into that category. The majority of people who consider themselves vegans fall into that category. Then I think that once that's established with someone, you can kind of go further with that, because someone may feel that, but they may not be aware of the extent to which animals are oppressed by, or other animals oppressed by humans. And so you can say, well, look, if why are you, what is the reason that you don't eat animal products? So because I don't like the fact that these animals are reared and slaughtered, and it doesn't need to happen. And so what you can do is then extend that to other areas where animals are oppressed, and say, well, what about that, that other area, animals are exploited or oppressed in that other area, and there's kind of, in a sense, really no difference with what, between that and what you're already opposed to.
Doesn't that sound like you're debating them at that stage, Ronnie?
No, it depends. I think it depends how you say it to them, because this is where you'd be involved in a person. If someone says to me, like, oh, veganism, it's nothing to do with the environment. You see, I mean, my position is that that you can't be vegan for the environment, but you should be an environmentalist for veganism.
Well, there's a comment about that, and given the fact that we said that we won't charge people, but so we will put some up. First of all, I know what Colleen is saying here, that it's me that's dry and academic. I know what's being said, but so Elliot is saying, Ronnie Lee, veganism is good for the environment is a weird statement to me. Exploiting non-human animals might be good for the environment in certain contexts.
No,
hang on. There's a caveat, which is, but animal liberation should obviously be environmental.
Yeah, I mean, how it's how it's a benefit to the environment is kind of what I've said already, in terms of if we put an end to animal farming and indeed the fishing industry, that would be hugely beneficial in terms of combating the climate crisis, which is probably and also the ecological crisis as well. So that would be of huge benefit, to the natural world if we were to do that. And that's where the dietary aspect of veganism, shall we say, is not veganism itself, but the dietary aspect of it. Like, because vegans don't consume animal products, that therefore means that those industries would come to an end, and with the benefits to the environment that would ensue. But when I'm saying that you can't be that, but veganism isn't about, veganism is a justice philosophy. It's now animal liberationist philosophy. So so although we've got this kind of knock-on effect of somebody adopting a vegan diet, in terms of that being beneficial to the environment.
So what you're saying? Are you saying that the environment doesn't benefit from a sense of justice?
Well, where the environment benefits from a sense of justice is where I say that that vegans should be environmentalists. In other words, because other animals are harmed by adverse human impact on the natural world, it's part of the vegan ethic for us to do our best to avoid being part of that, and to combat harm to the natural environment, because that's all part of the way in which humans oppress other animals. So that comes within environmentalism comes within in the ambit of veganism. So in other words, although you can't be vegan for the environment, I think you've got to be an environmentalist for veganism.
Isn't that semantics? Because that means that you're a vegan for the environment.
No, because somebody could say the reason, somebody could say the reason I don't consume animal products is because of the contribution animal farming and the fishing industry make to the climate crisis, and that's why. And that could be like without any.
But if you care about habitat, Ronnie,
But you see that the thing is that could be a totally human centric thing. That could be totally because I'm concerned about, the fact that our species may be wiped out, through through
being
the
concerned
climate
about
crisis.
habitat.
Yeah, but you see that but the thing is that somebody can be. You kind of have these a lot of environmental organisations that are like very much human centric. That the reason they want to protect the natural world is because of the benefits to humans of that.
Yeah, but vegans won't be in that boat though, will they? So
well, no, but somebody who considers that that veganism is just
but somebody who's
just
vegan
a
for the
diet.
environment, Ronnie, is obviously coming at it from the vegan point of view.
No, somebody who thinks that veganism is just a diet, right? And that the reason they've adopted that diet is to protect the environment for the benefit of humans, right? What I'm saying is that's not
that wouldn't be a vegan thing.
They're not vegan.
That'd be a plant-based environmentalist, right?
They wouldn't be a vegan, but they may think they're a vegan.
No, it's not
because
relevant. Then. It's not
they
relevant,
might consider that vegan. If someone considers that veganism, is just a diet, they could adopt that diet.
Well, we need some INREACH to put them right on that.
Yeah, they could adopt that diet for reasons other than
you're being encouraged to kind of give a bit of a summary about INREACH in a minute. But first of all, Fatima says that history is seen as nerdy, unfortunately. So that's another problem to INREACH, isn't it?
Yeah, I think one of the difficulties is kind of like a technological thing in that, like, a lot of the stuff that's starting to change now. There's a lot of stuff going up. And I know, like, you've done a lot of work on this, and Andy has as well, in the sense of putting stuff on YouTube, for instance, regarding what the founders of the vegan movement said and what they intended. And I think one of the problems is that that really, for a long time, could only be found in books and in printed material. Whereas you've got people these days that look for their information largely to social media and to videos, and because a lot of that stuff didn't appear in that format, those kind of newer vegans didn't know about it. It wasn't something that they
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, if by bringing the history into the modern way of communication, that's the obvious thing to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean that's the idea. In fact, it's a biggie this coming Thursday, people, because it's Leslie Cross we're dealing with now. Cliff has asked you to give a quick recap of what do you actually mean by INREACH.
Well, I mean, what I mean by INREACH is just that, there's a lot of people who consider themselves vegan, who don't fully grasp the scope of veganism. I'll give you a bit, like, really, really simple example, and I've said it loads of times. That kind of, I've seen people on social media, on someone who says they're vegan, maybe a member of vegan groups on Facebook, etc. And it's their birthday, and you can do fundraisers on your birthday for for charities, can't you? You can, for my birthday, I'm collecting funds for so and so charity, and I've seen those people put things up on their Facebook saying, for my birthday, I'm collecting funds for Cancer Research UK or the British Heart Foundation, something like that. And these are charities that fund experiments on animals. So it wouldn't be consistent with the vegan ethic to be promoting those charities. And yet those people do, because they're unaware that those charities do that. They might be totally unaware of the whole area of animal experimentation, because there's so much emphasis these days on diet in relation to veganism, that those people might not even know very much at all about animal experimentation. And so when I see something like that, I'll put a comment saying, were you aware that this charity funds experiments on animals? And so that's a form of INREACH, to say to that person, because that person obviously wasn't aware of that, because as a vegan, if they're true to vegan principles, they wouldn't be promoting that, would they? You see, so that's just that's just like a small example of that, and it's also to do with other things that people do. There's all sorts of ways in our everyday life that we kind of contribute to stuff that oppresses or exploits other animals that we might not be aware of. Somebody might be investing with a particular bank that in turn invests very heavily in animal agriculture, for instance, and so that person could be educated about that, and then maybe encouraged to move their money to a more ethical bank instead. It's all these things. That's what I'm saying. Where people genuinely aren't aware of stuff. I mean, there's probably stuff I'm not aware of that if someone told me about it, I wouldn't be angry with them. I'd be grateful that they told me, to be honest.
I seem to remember it used to be a bit tighter on that. I mean, like for everybody used to know about banks. I mean, everybody boycotted Barclays Bank because of apartheid. Everybody in the movement was really kind of banking with the Co-op Bank. This is Britain, of course. And everybody was boycotting Unilever because of the vivisection. Everybody was boycotting Nestle for a variety of reasons, and it was very well. It was uncommon not to find somebody who didn't know all of that.
I think one of the reasons I think the kind of animal experimentation and knowledge about that and campaigning against that used to be much more prominent in the movement. So people knew a lot more about it and who was involved in it. A lot of vegans these days wouldn't know about Unilever and their involvement in animal experimentation, and they'll happily buy products that that's certified as suitable for vegans in the sense they don't contain animal products, but are produced by companies like Unilever. I mean, it's difficult. It's a difficult one because,
well, again, the other example I gave was Nestle, but I mean, a lot of modern day vegans would probably respond that's got nothing to do with veganism.
Well, it depends on it depends on what someone's understanding of the definition of veganism is, really, doesn't it? In that sense, but yes, I mean, yeah, Nestle, Unilever, there's all these companies. I mean, it's difficult because, for instance, it's very hard to find a commercially produced plant milk that isn't connected to the dairy industry. Like I think almost all plant milks, or perhaps all of them, that are sold in supermarkets these days, they're either directly produced by dairy companies or they're produced by a company that's a subsidiary of a dairy company. So it's kind of really hard. It's
interesting the way that's all worked out, isn't it? Because I mean, maybe what we need, really, fun enough, is to start doing some INREACH about Plamil. The chances are there's going to be a lot of modern day vegans who don't know what Plamil is.
No, and it's whether it's also the availability of it, because it's not something that's widely available in supermarkets or anything like that. And
no, but we need to create a demand, don't we?
Would they be able to supply that demand? If that demand was created.
Haven't seen Plamil for years. Have you seen Plamil for years? I mean, where would you go to get it? Is it online?
I don't know I honestly don't know where I'd go to get. I mean, ideally, what I'd like to do, and it's
but we should though, Ronnie, because of the point you just made, the fact that
I think that, yes, I think if we can obtain stuff like that, it's just that kind of, it's in a sense ease of availability to people, and it's whether they've got the capacity to supply everywhere where people get it from. That I think it's just that, like, that practical consideration with it. I mean, ideally, what I'd like to do, my kind of home circumstances were different, is make my own plant milk from oats, and that's quite easy to do. I've got a friend who does it just in a few minutes. Makes this lovely plant milk from oats,
Well, yeah,
quite an
but
easy
again, you
process.
see, we've got a lot. It's interesting, again, isn't it? That you've got a. I would suggest that might be a bit of a generational divide, but not entirely. But the idea that veganism is about convenience and having a vegan version of everything and all that, and so the idea of having to make the vegan version
You
yourself
see,
seems a bit of a throwback.
I think this is another aspect of INREACH, because you see, it's kind of about, it's really about trying to be as ethical as we can, in terms of kind of contributing as little as we can to the oppression and exploitation of others, isn't it? And so, and we need to be kind of sort of like mindful of that, that because it's all about choice, because when we say go into a shop or a supermarket and we choose the plant milk instead of the dairy milk, we're making an ethical choice. We're saying, well, I'm going to choose that product because no animals have been exploited to produce that product, whereas the other one they have been, and so I'm going to choose the more ethical product. And I think we should always have that in our mind as best we can. Not that we can kind of we spend ages and ages doing it and go around with some kind of calculator or something, but we should always be trying to make the most ethical choice. It's like, for instance, this whole kind of debate about McDonald's, and is it okay for vegans to go into McDonald's and eat the plants, or go into one of these other burger chains and eat their kind of plant-based version of the meat burger that they produce, and people say, oh well, that's no different to going in a supermarket and kind of buying stuff from a supermarket, because they sell loads of animal products as well. And I'd say, well, yeah, in a sense it isn't different, but in another sense it is different, because it's to do with kind of availability and our ability to make the most ethical choice. And so with supermarkets, it's quite often difficult to get stuff other than in the supermarket in practical terms. With eating places, there's loads of choice. You don't have to eat in McDonald's. There's loads of choices. There are loads of other eating places that aren't as unethical as McDonald's. And I think that kind of we're sort of morally bound really to kind of
some of the most prominent influencers have suggested that we should support McDonald's in order to get that product out in front.
But you see what happens if you've got like maybe a family-run cafe around the corner, or perhaps a vegan cafe where you could eat instead of at McDonald's. And so if you support McDonald's instead of supporting that place, then you're withdrawing custom from that
I
place.
get that bit of it, Ronnie, but you're not going to be able to go to the McDonald's customers and go, hey, do you want to come around the corner instead?
No, you're not going to be able to go to the McDonald's customers, but you see it's a kind of progression, isn't it? Because what happens is there's people going in McDonald's anyway, and they're eating the beef burger or whatever's in there, right? And then when they learn about veganism, they're still going in McDonald's, but then they swap that for the plant, for the one that's suitable for vegans, right? So those are the people really that's kind of aimed at. But
those are the people then who you want to go around the corner then, right?
Yeah, that's right. But then this is where we come to INREACH, isn't it? To say to those people, yeah, it's great that you become vegan, and yeah, it's great you're eating the plant instead of eating the beef burger, but there is an even more ethical option than that, and that is not to go to McDonald's and to go somewhere that's like more ethical or less unethical than McDonald's. So it's like a progression, isn't it? It's a progression along this moral trajectory, really, this ethical trajectory, and I think INREACH is about taking people further along that road.
Okay, well, we've got a few things in the chat to catch up on. Got something from Cliff, a little bit of breaking news from Joanna. I didn't know the J stood for John. I thought it was something else, but apparently he's officially arrested in court. So that's a bit of news.
Is he being tried as an adult though?
I don't know.
It could plead. I suppose he could plead insanity, couldn't he? Really, it might be.
He'll be throwing his dummy out no
That would be
matter
quite
what there
open
is.
to him to plead insanity. He probably, would get away with that.
Okay, before I come on to Cliff, and then there's something from Drummer as well, just on the McDonald's thing, and about this progression that you said, which I kind of quite like what you just said there.
Yeah.
That like people go vegan, they might go there because of the McPlant thing.
Yeah.
But then eventually they'll be going around the corner. Now, do you think it's a good idea for vegans to kind of do a little demo, not a demo, that's the wrong thing, but do a little presence outside McDonald's, kind of suggesting to people as they go in that they try the McPlant and to report back on it when they come out?
I totally support that, because what you're doing, you're helping people in that progression. You've got people that are going in there that are going to go and eat the beef burger or whatever, or the chicken burger or what they eat, and if you're encouraging those people to eat the McPlant instead, then you are moving along.
It rankles with me, Ronnie, because I mean I wouldn't give McShite.
But I'm saying that I can see I can see that kind of, because what you're doing is you're encouraging someone to take a step along that ethical journey, aren't you?
That's right, and also it gets them to think about ethical issues, because what they tend to do, and it's particularly prevalent on TikTok, is they'll say things. It happened to me, I think, yesterday or the day before, where it might have been the day before, basically saying, oh, you vegans, you want things to, to taste like meat. And so I ended up talking to this guy who said that the McPlant wasn't very good. And I said, well, what prompted you to try it? And then he made up this story that, oh, I was given it by mistake, and I said, and all this. So he was trying to edge it. It's just that people often say, oh, that's rubbish, right? That's crap. And you go, okay, when did you try it? And of course they haven't.
No. And you bet if they'd been given that and not told it was suitable for vegans, they'd probably think it was okay, wouldn't they? And it's only when you tell them that they suddenly decide that.
Yeah, well, you've kind of blown that by the fact that they've got to go and ask for the McPlant. So I mean, you can't have that kind of.
Oh, you can't do that in McDonald's.
Yeah,
but I mean, I've known that happen in other circumstances.
Yeah, it's happened a lot. I mean, even down to, I mean, Jennifer always says on her lives that there's people from the industry who can't tell the vegan product or the plant-based product, vegan-friendly product from the flesh. And
I'm quite sure that's true. And then there was that expert, wasn't there, on?
Yeah, the sausage guy.
The sausage expert that thought the vegan sausage was wonderful.
The sausage butty king,
and then changed his mind when he was told it was the one that was suitable for vegans. Yeah. So there we are. That's kind of what
let's move on to what Cliff was saying here. I saw a vegan recently raising money for guide dogs to the blind. This was said when you were talking about the British Heart Foundation. I messaged the person to point out the issue, and I got called ableist for my trouble. So that could that be a communication issue? Would they respond that way no matter what you said? You see, what would the opening gambit on that be, Ronnie?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, you've got to kind of be diplomatic in a situation like this, but still challenge the fact that that dog's being used for human purposes, and that's and ethically that's not right. So I would say, I'd say, do you think it's right that that dogs should be used as like in that way by humans, or used at all by humans, and then see what they say and then take it on from there? Because there's a whole history in this.
You're talking to another vegan here.
Yeah. Because you're talking to a vegan, so that person, you see, you'd say, well, look, as a vegan, you are opposed to all exploitation of other animals, aren't you, by humans? And isn't this isn't guide dogs for the blind a form of exploitation? All right, it might not be the most horrendous form of exploitation in the world, but nevertheless, it is a form of exploitation.
Hmm.
You know.
Well, it'd be interesting to see how that kind of panned
Yeah.
out, really, in the sense that you can imagine that a lot of people would.
But you know what? There's vegans that ride horses, isn't there? People who call themselves vegans that ride horses.
Well, I'm glad you did that caveat in the end. The people who call themselves vegans, yeah.
Yeah. Because you see, they don't see that is kind of exploitation when it kind of it is. I mean, particularly if the horse isn't a rescued horse, but one that they've paid a horse breeder to have. You know what I mean? Or they're going to a horse riding school and giving money to the riding school to be able to ride
I
the
remember
horse.
having this conversation with somebody who was talking about the fact is that the horses need exercise, and so my response was, well, why don't you go down the beach with them in the same way as you go down with your dog, and let them off, because they were talking about this kind of really close relationship they had with this animal. You know, that they were like brothers and sisters and all that. But oh no, we couldn't let them off because they'll run away. And I said, well, why would they run away from their human friend? You know, I mean, dogs don't run away, right? And so
no, I mean, I don't know how how that worked. I mean, I was at an animal sanctuary 2 or 3 weeks ago that got horses, and they were kind of running around in the field. And there was no humans on their backs. I mean, they're capable of like running around and getting exercise without humans on their backs. So I kind of don't really, I don't really know where that comes in, that they have to be.
Well, I think it's to do with the fact that it's the idea of letting them really kind of let rip and gallop and stuff, and they're frightened of them running away.
Yeah, I think in circumstances where they haven't got that, I mean, that they're all in the big field, these horses, and because horses should be in a big group. That's how they are in their natural situation. They're in a great big herd, aren't they? Galloping across the plains. That's how they are in nature.
That's how it is.
Yeah. So they're meant to be in a group of lots of horses. They're not meant to be on their own. It's the same with dogs, really. Dogs are a pack animal, aren't they? They kind of, they need the company of other dogs, really. Although people say, well, they treat the humans as
the leader of the pack.
Yeah.
Going back to Plamil, apparently Amazon sells it now. That's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of just the practicality of I mean, it'd be brilliant if there was a totally vegan produced, a plant milk produced by a vegan company that could be widespread, that became, it became available everywhere. You see, one danger of these things, though, is that it's like if you look at the vegan cheese. Well, what I said about the plant milks is is also echoed with the vegan cheese, or cheese that's suitable, stuff that's called vegan cheese. Because I don't think there's a company now that produces that, unless if you get the artisan stuff that you can kind of send away for and stuff, that's kind of, that can, very often is like vegan, produced by a small vegan business or perhaps an individual person. But the stuff that's sort of widely available in supermarkets, I don't think any of that now is produced by a vegan company. I mean, the stuff that like Bute Island Foods up in Scotland is kind of, they were a vegan run company, or I think kind of there was a little bit of question mark over whether all the ones that ran it were vegan, but it was very much that way. That ran Bute Island Foods for years and years and years. They were like one of the kind of original vegan cheeses that you could buy in health food shops, and then they got into supermarkets. They started producing a lot of the supermarkets' own brand cheese, and then they got bought out by a huge Canadian dairy company. You see, because and
well, it was a problem for us because we were getting samples first of all of Violife, and that happened to them, and then secondly of Follow Your Heart, and I think that happened to them.
yeah, because what's happening is these dairy companies are looking to diversify. They're thinking, shit, you know, people are kind of starting to eat more, you know, sort of plant-based products. You know, more people are going vegan.
I mean, this is your kind of little vegan thing around the corner from McDonald's, but in bigger, because this is capitalism, right? Seeing a market and wanting to get their share of it
That's right.
while it's there.
Yeah,
but them getting their share of it might destroy that market, but they don't care about that.
Well, it's kind of easier for them to buy out the existing vegan business than to start producing.
Yeah, let them do all the groundwork and all the hard work.
They just do it because, like, the company that bought out, I can't remember the name of it. It's a Canadian dairy company that bought out Butte Island Foods. It's the same company that produces Cathedral City, and they now produce like a version of Cathedral City that's suitable for vegans, and that's made on Butte Island by Butte Island Foods. That's where that all comes from.
All right. Maybe Colleen might know this Canadian.
Yeah. I can't remember the exact name of it. Does it begin with S?
What's your recipe? Somebody's asking. Well, Graham's asking. This is for the
what's that for the oat milk?
Yeah.
I think I don't make it because it's just because of my family circumstances. It'd be difficult to do it.
Okay, what's the recipe then?
The recipe, I think you just look online. Because I haven't got a recipe because I'm not in a position, unfortunately, to be able to do it. But I think I know my friend who did it. It was really, really simple. It was just basically oats and water and a kind of blender and different things. I think she poured it through some kind of filter or something like that. But there'd be recipes online. Just look online, you know, homemade oat milk, and there's probably a number of recipes for it. I think there's some way you kind of put a bit of oil in it and stuff. There's different ways of doing it, and you'd probably find the one that suited you best. So yeah, it'd be online.
Yeah. Now Fatima said, shouldn't what's best for the other animals guide all our tactics? Well, yeah, it's just that we can't get consensus on it.
Yeah, that should be, you know, what guides what we, you know.
I mean, presumably this reflexivity or this conversation, this communication that should go on within our movement is hampered by the fact that we don't seem to be very good at it. But then again, I don't know whether there's anybody any good at it in the social media space.
I think what happens is we kind of get in a sense like trapped in our own bubble, trapped in our own little world, and as if that's all there is. And so if someone, you know, if there's kind of disagreement, you know, between people within that world, within the kind of what we might call the vegan world, it can get really nasty because people don't think that that's kind of that, you know, the people who are the real problems are the people outside of that, you know, the people that still oppress animals, the people that still, you know, consume animal products, you know, and it's like done without it's, you know, people forget that those are the real enemy. And they're kind of like, you know, because you'll get people that agree on like 95% of things, 99% of things within the vegan community. And they'll fight over the 5% or even the 1% where they disagree, and like be really horrible to each other over that little 1% where they disagree. Whereas, you know, who we should be fighting, where we should be campaigning is in that world that's occupied by all the people that support the continued exploitation and oppression of other animals. You kind of forget you're in this enclosed community, and you like forget that, you know, what the true situation of the world is. And so we've always got to be mindful of that and thinking, well, don't, you know, stop treating like our other, other vegans, or even people claim to be vegan. If you think, oh yeah, you're not vegan because like I don't agree with that or that thing you did or whatever, but like stop treating those people as enemies. You know, don't approach them as enemies.
I think the true situation of the world begins with F and ends with hooked something.
well, we've got to try and uneff it, haven't we? You know, this is all part of what this is all about, and I think that's the thing that you know, like kind of, and I think it's like far better to work together on those areas where we agree, the huge areas we agree on. It's far better to work together on that than to fight over the small areas where you disagree, particularly if that kind of fighting gets really nasty, which it does.
Well, as you know, easier said than done. I want to. I don't think I've done this for a few weeks really. This is Andy's petition. You know, to find out from the smartphone manufacturers what animal products or products derived from other animals are in the devices. Because ever since this petition went up, because it used to be almost like a daily thing, you get a deluge of people on TikTok in particular talking about what's in your phones. You know, there's a cow in your phone and all that. And since this petition went up, that's all kind of gone. I mean, I don't think I've seen that claim for about.
I've got a little man in my phone. Actually, he tells me off if I swear. He tells me off, like, he goes, "That's not nice," and don't use that sort of language. It's like very prude. That person in the phone is like really prude, aren't they? I've noticed.
Well, it's a good job you didn't program it, isn't it? So,
yeah. Oh, I wonder if you can get a program of like where it swears, and you could have a real good like swearing thing with it.
Well, you can with those sat navs, can't you? You can get like.
Oh yeah, you can get ones that are really rude.
Yeah, you can get sat navs in the kind of voice of Homer Simpson. I was in a car once with this Homer Simpson sat nav, but after about 7 minutes, it was incredibly boring. You know, because it was just going dope and all this shite, you know, and
it was just ridiculous. You know, ones that swear at you when you miss the turning and that might be quite interesting, but that would get boring as well, wouldn't it, if they did it all the time? No, but yeah, I think I think it's. But the other thing about smartphones, it's not just whether or not there's animal products in them. It's like, you know, the production of these devices cause harm to other animals in other ways, you know, through the mining process, you know, the destruction of natural habitat that's connected with that, and all that, you know. So we have to kind of take that into consideration as well. And I think, you know, really in terms of, you know, something like a smartphone, I think we have to, you know, they were important. I mean, you know, both of us are using computers, you know, for this, you know, tonight, and I think we'd like to think that, you know, overall,
mine's a rock one.
Yours a rock computer, like and you've done a really good.
I'm kind of peddling underneath.
You've done a really good drawing of your face on there. It looks really realistic on there, like I have on my rock computer. But yes, so obviously, you know, there's technology and this, you know, there's stuff gone into that. But we'd like to think, yeah, we know that, but like, overall, you know, you know, there's a beneficial effect of like what we're doing, you know, and that's kind of how you sort of justify it, isn't it? And I think it's the same with smartphones. I think if you're campaigning for veganism, then, you know, a smartphone is kind of really essential. But I think we still need to be mindful of, you know, of kind of our impact in terms of that. Like, for instance, I'll never buy a new one. I'll never buy a new one. Whenever I need another smartphone, I'll always get a secondhand one or a reconditioned one or something like that. So I'm not creating as much demand.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a new one.
No, you don't need to.
Ronnie, you're being INREAChed by Graham. You say something about the greater good. Said enslaving an individual to serve another for the greater good. Singer vibes.
No, I don't. I mean, I don't agree with enslaving. I don't believe in enslaving other animals.
Well, I might be reading that wrong. It's just that sometimes you try and match up the comment to something that was said 20 minutes ago. So
no, I think that's probably to do with the guide dogs for the blind, which I fundamentally don't agree with that. I don't think
Yeah.
dogs. I don't think dogs should have been used by humans at all. I mean, the history of like the kind of oppression and enslavement of dogs by humans goes back, because all dogs, even the smallest little Chihuahua, or little Pekingese, or any of them, they all come from wolves. They're all descended from wolves. And it's where humans took wolves and selectively bred them for the purpose of oppressing other animals. Because originally, all these different breeds of dogs, they were either bred for hunting or herding, or perhaps retrieving, all in connection with the human oppression and exploitation of other animals. And it's only in really quite recent times that they've become more, used as what could be called companion animals, referred to as companion animals. And you've got all the kind of, things like crufts, where you've got the different breeds and, the show dogs, and you've got all that kind of thing. That's in the history of like the oppression of dogs by humans. That's quite recent. What they were originally like, all of them were selectively bred by humans to like, to help in the oppression, exploitation of other animals. And yes, and they're now largely exploited in a different way, but it's still not right.
Well, we're an hour and a quarter in. We were saying that this is going to be a short one, and Ronnie said,
we're not capable of doing short
Ronnie
ones.
says I wouldn't bank on that.
But what I'm saying, I mean, basically what I'm saying is like outreach. Like, we all agree outreach is really important. We need to educate as many people as possible to go vegan. And I think another part of INREACH is like is encouraging vegans to be active. That's part of INREACH, to say to people, well, look, why are you vegan? Because you're opposed to the oppression, exploitation of other animals. You don't like what's going on, but it's not going to stop, is it? While all these other people aren't vegan. So really, if you kind of really care, you really want what you desire by becoming vegan, then the answer to that is to go out, educate other people to be vegan. Otherwise, that's not going to happen. So that's part of INREACH as well, encouraging vegans to be activists is INREACH. It's encouraging them to go further along the road, really. Encouraging them to kind of,
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing which is really interesting. I thought I'd bring this up in relation, because I thought you might get around to this eventually, Ronnie. So there was on another live stream, the host was asking the guest, well, how could we improve vegan outreach, or how can we improve the situation vis-a-vis veganism? And the guy was going through, there's been this film and that film, and there's been this development and that development, and there's been this growth in consumerisms, and all that kind of stuff. And it was interesting to me, because the one thing that he didn't touch on, because he said that he thought that the vegan outreach was doing really good in terms of what it was doing, but he didn't seem to be tuned into the idea that there just wasn't enough of it, and it wasn't necessarily always in the right place. And this idea of all the time and everywhere, he hadn't kind of thought of that when it came to how can we improve vegan education, and that part of it, which is your main thing.
Yeah,
he didn't even.
Well, it's really what I call community vegan outreach. In other words, people outreach in their own local communities, because most kinds of physical outreach, in the street, tends to happen in the centre of big cities, really wherever it is in the world. But in kind of more localized communities, there kind of isn't any like this, like in smaller towns and even suburbs of cities, where people live, where you have shopping centres and all that. You've got, all sorts of different forms of outreach could take place in those places, but by and large it doesn't. So there's this huge untapped area, really, where outreach could take place, but where it isn't taking place. And it's a question of how do we kind of mobilize more vegans? How do you mobilize vegans to do outreach within their local community? Because it can be very, very
going
simple.
back to the INREACH, it was interesting to me when the actual subject was how can we improve vegan outreach, that wasn't seen as the obvious thing to do, which is
Yes.
increase the amount of it.
Yeah, that's right, and I think it's just a message that kind of needs to be repeated, that like people, and it does mean that like people who currently are just vegan activists and will go into the centre of a big city to join other activists and doing an event in a Cuba Truth or other events that take place in the centre of big cities, to think, well, okay, but like, how can I kind of step up one and actually become an organizer and an instigator of outreach in my own area where I live, and maybe mobilize some of the local vegans in my own area who are currently inactive, get them to help me, get them involved locally, because a lot of people prefer to stay local and prefer just to do local stuff. And so there's this really untapped resource, I think, of vegans who aren't active but would become active if they were presented with the type of activism that kind of more appeals to them, which is more localized.
We'll have to republicize.
And that's once again, that's INREACH. That's educating, encouraging vegans to become activists. That's another form of INREACH as well.
Well, speaking of INREACH, this is INREACH to me in the sense that I'm not quite sure if I knew, but deaf guide dog, sort of blind guide dog. You heard of that before?
Hearing dogs for the deaf. You've got guide dogs for the blind. You've got hearing dogs for the deaf. You've got assistance dogs for people with disabilities. You've got all categories where they're, because it just used to be the guide dogs for the blind, but then I think they're kind of starting to use them in these other categories as well.
Well, I've never heard of this before.
I mean, where the practical solution to this will come is with kind of artificial intelligence, won't it? Although that doesn't mean that
everybody gets their own data from Star Trek.
Well, everyone would get like there'd be some kind of robot or something that would kind of be developed to kind of to help people in those situations, because I kind of can understand it, although I don't agree with the concept of dogs being used at all in these situations. I kind of understand someone not wanting another human around, helping them. I can understand somebody.
Well, yeah, but it's not any dog's fault that they've got a physical...
It's not the dog's fault. No, it's not the dog's fault. So that isn't an excuse or a reason to use these dogs. No, they shouldn't be used. That's an infringement of their rights, and it's not justifiable. But in practical terms, I think maybe what will happen is that you see, and of course the thing is, while we've got this reliance on on guide dogs and hearing dogs for deaf and all that, while there's reliance on them, then I think that holds back any efforts to develop other forms by which those people could be helped. Because I think, oh well, we can use a dog for that. We don't need to kind of. It's a bit like if all of a sudden all animal experiments were ended, you'd very, very quickly get all loads of other methods spring up, because necessity is the mother of invention, isn't it?
It is, yeah. That's that's always been suggested from the scientific anti-vivisectionists, in the sense that vivisection is actually holding science back.
Yes.
And I think that,
although I'm wary of the scientific argument in terms of vivisection, because
but that particular part of it is
that particular part of it. No, I think that's absolutely true. I think if we just abolished overnight, you'd soon see all these kind of non-animal methods.
One thing that got in the way, Hans Royce made this point in Slaughter of the Innocent, is that any chump can sling a rat into a gas chamber and then monitor the results, whereas if you've got to use computers and sophisticated kind of machinery and stuff, then it might be a different thing. So there might be kind of internal problems, in the sense that no industry likes to have to retrain. There's always that resistance. Just sociologically we know that.
I think that's the case, and I think there's also a lot of money in it. There's a lot of people making a lot of money out of the whole animal experimentation business, and of course they've got mates in the governments I mean, we've got a government that's not really interested in science when it gets in the way of money making, and and gets in the way of, like, what their supporters want. I mean, a prime example of that is we've got the badger cull, which is totally unscientific. There's no scientific basis for it, and yet that's continued because basically there's a lot of farmers want to kill badgers, and a lot of people want badgers cleared from land so they can build on that land. That's what happens. It's not that they'll ignore science when they've got other priorities, and I think that's very much the case.
Well, they'll ignore morals anyway.
They'll ignore
know
morals. Yeah, absolutely. And I think and they will ignore science as well when that doesn't suit their other desires, so to speak.
Right, Ronnie. So I think we've probably exhausted this particular theme.
Yes.
Of things. So it's been an interesting one. I'm not convinced that we have kind of come up with how best to.
I think kind of how you do it is like, it's just in general. Of course, as vegans, we'll kind of all the time come across other vegans, won't we? And we'll become involved in conversation with them, and I think that's one way of doing it, in a kind of in a friendly way, pointing out things to people. And also, I think in if we're making speeches in public, these things can be pointed out. I'd say the major thing that's ignored by vegans is really the environmental aspect. You've got a lot of people who are vegan or consider themselves vegan that will continue to do things that are like really, really harmful to the environment, and without realizing, or without wanting to realize, the harm that does to the natural world and the other animals that inhabit it. And I think that's probably the major area where the kind of INREACH needs to be done. That area, and also in terms of encouraging vegans to become activists, to become outreachers.
I think Graham said this a couple of times. The fact that this idea of kind of talking about yourself and the way that you did it, it kind of creates a rapport. And it also doesn't kind of, you're the ignorant one, I'm the, it breaks down that kind of barrier, isn't it?
I think that's right. I mean, I do that with outreach as well, because I used to be the probably worst meat eater in the world. So I'll talk about myself and what happened to me and why I stopped doing that. When I do outreach, I'll talk to people like that. Like, if I can, it's more or less, if I can do it, so can you, type of thing. I don't kind of actually say that to them, but that's the sort of message, really.
Yeah. If I can do it, you can do it too.
Yeah.
Right, people. I'm determined to get this done before we're 90 minutes. So thanks very much for people tuning in. Thanks, Ronnie, for your wise words as per usual. And one last question is: do you remember when I told you my chiropractor joke?
No, that's too. Well, it's short-term memory that goes first, isn't it? So
it is. Yeah.
It's probably told me that too recent for me to remember it. Yeah.
Well, we shall be back, and we shall be back next week, all being well, providing, of course, Ronnie, that
we are both still alive.